It seems that more and more people like the idea of living life in a more natural and sustainable way. But how do you go about doing that? Our guest today has a few ideas on that topic. Mandy Sandbach is the president of the Lethbridge Sustainable Living Association. Welcome to BCN, Mandy.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk a bit about your group, the Lethbridge Sustainable Living Association. What is it all about?
Well, originally, group started in 2012 with a group of folks who wanted to create an eco-village. They recognized there was a need to maybe live in a more sustainable way. Since then, it's kind of morphed and changed into this like grassroots, hands-on, skill-sharing, collaborative approach. And so we have several different initiatives in the community: the Fruit Rescue Program, Permaculture Lethbridge, the Community Clothing Swap, and the Zero Waste Initiative as well. And so through all of those different initiatives, we're able to reach out and start to help people on their sustainable journey, regardless of where they're at.
Now, Mandy, food is one of your focal points. Why is it so important for people to grow their own?
Oh, wow. It's quite a holistic approach, the way the LSLA looks at it. But for me personally, we all have great memories of growing food with Grandma and Grandpa in our garden spaces. It's like something that nourishes our soul. And keeps us in touch with nature, which is really important. But from a perspective of local food production, what we want to see is people empowered to actually start learning these basic skills. There was a time and a place where we had that information sort of shared down from generation to generation, and it hasn't quite been that way. And so what we want to see is people empowered with the skills and knowledge to be able to do that, so that they can first go into their backyards and grow with the space and the soil that they have available, and then be able to assess where they're at for their food needs, rather than having to rely on grocery stores totally and completely. The other thing that it does is it creates this beautiful sense of community as we're gathering together and we're sharing knowledge and we're looking for land, because not everybody has access to land to grow in. And so not only are we growing local food that grows community, but we're also eating cleaner food typically when it does come from shorter distances away.
I have an uncle and aunt that have an acreage out by Bowden, and it was just acres and acres, it seemed like anyway, of peas and carrots. And it was so wonderful. You know, you pull it out of the ground, take it off the vine, crack it open, eat it. It was so tasty and refreshing, right? Yeah. The only thing is when you got to harvest all those vegetables, right? That's a bit of work.
Yeah.
But I guess it's good exercise too at the same time.
Absolutely,
Now,
it's
do you
good.
teach gardening too, gardening skills?
The Lethbridge Sustainable Living, we offer a series of workshops and events and tours of different spaces that are growing. So not just that we teach the skills, but we're taking them and pointing them to people in the community who are still doing that, or are doing different ways to do that. Also, we collaborate with other organizations, like the Interfaith Food Bank has a learning garden. And so me personally, I will collaborate with them to do a series of workshops. And in what you'll see oftentimes in the spring is what's called the Seed to Supper program. And that's a basic gardening workshop. So we cover things like composting, water harvesting, building soil, companion planting, all the things that you need to know to have sustainable gardens.
What about those community gardens? I'm thinking specifically for people in condominiums or maybe apartments, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of folks come to us and say, I'm in an apartment, how am I going to grow? Indoor growing is difficult at best, but sometimes they have a patio, and so you can look at container gardening in those spaces. But we also have community and communal gardens here in Lethbridge. So the Kinsman Park, for example, has a communal garden that's just open for anyone in the neighborhood to come in and participate in. In places like Copperwood, they're actually designing these community gardens to be actually in those spaces, so you can get a plot for community gardens as well if you don't have land of your own.
What about food storage? For many people, that can be a serious challenge.
Yeah, it is. That's another one of those skills, right, that used to be passed down from generation to generation. And so part of our mandate is really bringing back those basic skills and start teaching people how to start preserving, whether it's canning or jamming or pickling or dehydrating, making applesauce, things like that. And so making those workshops accessible financially as well as locationally. And then that collaborative approach comes in again in terms of partnering with places like the Soup Kitchen or the Interfaith Food Bank to utilize their space and teach their clientele as well how to do it.
The first time I tried some of the dried out fruit, such as like bananas, it was almost like banana jerky. It was kind of cool, you know, it was kind of tasty, and I tried that as a kid, and I thought, this is really neat.
Yeah.
And it's healthy too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Better than the alternative with a lot of candies for kids, right?
Absolutely, yeah, especially if we're comparing it to processed sugars and things like that.
Mandy, you have something as well called the Fruit Rescue Program.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Yeah, the Fruit Rescue Program is an initiative of the LSLA, and is a group of volunteers. And so I need to be really clear, we're not a fruit picking service, because you can't just phone us up and we'll come pick your fruit.
Apples, right? Sure.
We're limited by our volunteer base. But what we do is we have a relationship with landowners who have fruit trees and shrubs that they're not able to get to picking. Lots of our seniors can't get out and get their trees picked.
Of course, yeah.
And then we have a group of volunteers, and so what we do is we match our volunteers with our landowners, and we create these picking events where we're able to utilize the fruit. Thousands and thousands of pounds of fruit every year we divert from falling on the ground, and distribute it within the community, both to our seniors, the landowners, our volunteer pickers, the food bank, the soup kitchen, lots of different places. Recently, in the last couple of years, the Fruit Rescue Program was able to raise money for a commercial apple press, and so that's allowed us to be really mobile and actually go out to the spaces, pick the apples, for example, on site, and then do the juicing and the pasteurization there, and then distribute it in the form of juice as well.
How about when it comes to vegetables and helping people pick their vegetables? Do you have some veggie tales for us?
No veggie tales. We are limited again by the amount of volunteers that we have. So what we do offer is the ability to share some knowledge and pass that information around. So part of the community creation is that we have this beautiful foundation for being able to put people in touch with one another so that they can help people out. So for example, if our seniors need certain fruit and they can't get out to pick it, we'll pick a bag and take it to them. And so we try to connect our volunteers in that way, whether it's veggies or fruit. It just happens that we have a real abundance of fruit here in Lethbridge. Sour cherries, pears, apples of all kinds, raspberries, all the berries. So lots of abundance.
Now, you encourage people as well to buy local, but doesn't that get to be a little expensive, though, when you're going to the farmer's market? I mean, you're supporting local producers, which is wonderful, but sometimes people can't afford that.
Yeah, the cost is it's a really veiled process, too, in terms of the cost. We have lots of different issues within that shopping local idea. From the perspective of sustainability and regeneration, we always want to support local because we want to keep those people employed. We want our food to have the least impact miles-wise, kilometers-wise, fossil fuel-wise, that it possibly can. And so cost becomes one of those things that we vote with our money
And
on.
maybe less pesticides as well?
Absolutely,
On a lot of
way
those fruits
less,
and vegetables,
absolutely.
right? Which is healthier for you?
Absolutely. So there's always this like organic or non-organic conversation, and I think it's less about that and more about what are the ethics of how the farmer's grown it, how close is it to me? Do I have a relationship with these people? That's a really important thing to consider. And so the other thing that you can do to keep the cost down is buy in bulk. So one of the things we offer as an organization is a cooperative ordering group where we can order large volumes and divide it up and you get it at a discount. All farmers have an ugly crop of carrots or potatoes that they can't sell in the store, and so you can approach the farmers if you have a relationship with them and say, hey, I'm happy to take your ugly beets or potatoes or carrots at a discounted rate, and that's often what happens. So there's ways around that cost.
That's a great idea. I mean, they're still
Yeah.
healthy for you.
Yeah,
You're still getting the
absolutely.
same nutrients, right?
Yes,
Vitamins
absolutely.
and minerals.
And better nutrients because they haven't been transported so long as what they would be if they came from California and things like that.
Let's talk about free-range meat and eggs. My father used to love, when I was a kid, buying the Hutterite chickens, he used to call them, right?
Yes, yeah.
And because they were so big and plump and they were healthy, they weren't plumped up artificially, right? How
yeah.
important is that, too?
Oh, it's really important. I think the important piece for my belief and what the LSLA tries to share is that you're asking questions. Who's your farmer? Where are they? Do you know them? Do you know what their practices are? And so it's less about spray or don't spray or plump them full of things or not, and more about just knowing that piece of it. Again, is short amount of distances our meat and our eggs come, the better off it is, the more nutrient dense it is, the better quality it is. And so you'll find that there's lots of farmers, local farmers, especially around Lethbridge, who may not be organic, but they're using ethical processes and they're not putting anything excess into the animals that needs to be. You can actually go out and witness the way they're farming. And so that's really great. Once you've had a taste for clean meat, I'll call it, free range is sort of, there's so many terms and it depends who's selling the product in terms of like what it actually is. But ask those questions about how they treat the animals, take a tour. But once you've had a taste for it, so we used to have our own eggs when we lived out of the city, and everybody we gave our eggs to, they're ruined for store-bought eggs anymore because there's such a difference in quality
spoiled,
and taste
right?
and texture. Yeah, and so it becomes in high demand. And that becomes a quality of life thing that you choose for you and your family. And the cost, you find ways around that. So.
What about when it comes to clothing? Do a lot of people still like to make their own clothes?
Oh, wow.
Outside
Yeah.
of grandma making the mittens and toques for the
My grandma
wintertime?
made so many of our clothes, and at the time I did not appreciate it, and now I definitely do. I don't know a ton of people who make their own clothes. I do know a couple of people who make them fashionably, but another option that we have are the things like our community clothing swap, where we gather donations of clothing and then we redistribute it. There's hundreds of thousands of pounds of clothes go into landfills every week of the year on the planet, and so if we can distribute that locally and get it moving within the economy here in town, then you don't have to buy that many extra clothes. There's no reason for that to be. So we provide that opportunity through our clothing swap.
Mandy, some people just don't like buying used clothing.
There's certain
They're
things
like, ew! You know how many sleeves and
Absolutely.
pits have been on this shirt? Like, no.
Absolutely.
So how do you convince people that, why buy
Yeah.
new when used will do?
Yeah, I don't believe in convincing people for anything. You either hear that call or you don't. And that's kind of how we function as an organization. We just want people to know we're here if that does feel right to you. There's certain items of clothing I won't buy used. I will only buy new, or I'll make on my
Undergarments, for instance, right?
Absolutely. And what we ask for from our community when they're donating is gently used. So if it has holes and you're not wearing it, we don't expect somebody else to wear your nasty socks. Like, that doesn't need to happen.
That ain't right.
No, it's not at all. But you can find some really great, name brand if that's what you're into. We have
Well, like
lots
my kids,
of things.
Oshkosh, that was a big thing way back when.
Absolutely. And my kids now as teenagers, they have like Champion and Adidas and all the things like that. We have those things donated. And when it's happening on a regular basis, you know that you can purge your closet, get a new group of clothes that, fills that gap if you want to feel like you've had some new clothes without a big cost associated with it.
Now, sometimes you also host make your own cleaners events.
Yes.
What are they all about?
Yeah, so that's another collaboration with the Purple Carrot here in town, and that's something that I do. So the LSLA will sometimes host that, and other people that we work with will. So the do-it-yourself cleaners is just really an introduction to how else we can make our own cleaners. So rather than bringing a bunch more chemical and plastic ware into the world, we're going to teach people how to make their own basic cleaners as well. And they work really, really well. There's this notion that the only way we can clean is by using bleach, for example. And there's tons and tons of studies
Well, for
talking.
mold, I know bleach really
Absolutely, and it works
right?
really well, and there's a time and a place for it.
Right.
But just our general cleaners, if we're just cleaning the bathroom or we're doing windows, vinegar and water works pristine to clean a window, for example. And so
Does it matter what kind of vinegar, like white
I would use a
vinegar?
white vinegar,
Okay,
yeah. So sometimes the apple cider vinegar, for example, is a little thicker.
Right.
But we want to empower people and inspire them to start looking around their kitchen to see how else they can use some of the supplies they have. So everything that we do and everything that we teach, no matter what the workshop is, will always be accessible. You don't have to buy a bunch of fancy things in order for it to help, in order for you to be able to use it. And the DIY household cleaners things about education, and then making their own, taking them home and trying them, and then they get to play with that formula and see how it works better for them.
I remember many years ago I was talking to an environmentalist saying to me, if you ever want to wash your vehicle, park it on your lawn. That way the water is going to go right into the grass and you can feed your grass at the same time,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Instead of out on your driveway or the sidewalk on the street, right? But what kind of natural soaps or detergents would you recommend as opposed to the store-bought brands?
Yeah, so there's a product called Castile soap. It's a basic hemp soap. In some of our stores, what we have a really...
Can you use that for vehicles?
No, not for vehicles specifically,
for your
just
hands.
regular
Okay.
formulation for regular soap. Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
Castile soap I would use for making like a liquid hand soap in a foamer pumper
How about
with
for
some
vehicles,
essential
commercial?
oils.
Is there anything?
I would use the same thing for the vehicle.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. You have to be aware of formulation because some of the products, all the products, will leave a film if you have too much of it. So it's a bit of experimentation in terms of how it works for you, right? Most of the people I speak with aren't so much concerned about their vehicle. It's more about how am I going to clean my kids and my clothes and my
Right.
kitchen counter and my bathroom. So part of what we want to inspire in people is this really creative process. So here's some information. Build on it, play with it, formulate it the way you want to, the way it works for your life and your journey, because not everybody's going to start by making their own cleaners. Maybe they start in a different way on their sustainable journey. And so we want to always leave it open so that they can actually make those choices for themselves.
I've tried some of those handmade soaps. you know, with the oatmeal and the honey, and oh, it's just amazing. The smell and the texture and the feel,
Yes.
and it's so worth it. And it lasts a lot
Yes.
longer than the
Yeah.
commercial soaps,
Yeah,
right?
it
With all the
does.
chemicals.
Yeah.
Now, what about zero waste? You guys actually have a zero waste social gathering. What's that all about?
Yes, we do. So it was sort of inspired by Southern Alberta Zero Waste, which is the group on Facebook, and we've kind of taken it under our wing. So what we've realized is nobody needs any more meetings in life. Nobody needs any more sort of like strict, rigid spaces. So we just want to create a social event. And what we're doing is leaving it up to the people who are attending those to really decide what we're doing. So for example, last month we gathered in a space, we had some tea, some snacks, and we made reusable tissues and reusable paper towels. We just cut up some extra fabric and we all came in and made ourselves a set, and then off we went. So we're going to do a bit of a skill share. Every month it'll be something different. It might be like a documentary, it might be just somebody sharing a skill with the group, might make some reusable products, it just depends.
Mandy Sandbach, president of the Lethbridge Sustainable Living Association. Thanks so much for joining me today in studio.
Thanks for having me.